What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Panda here, and we are playing some Watcher of Realms. Guys, today's video is going to be all about Guild Boss, but specifically about the Rage Regen featuring Elowen. As you guys know, we did just recently pull her, and I'm super excited to showcase this comp. I've put in quite a bit of work to kind of learn the best ways to do this. We're going to show you a little bit of the placement that I'm personally using, and then we'll actually run through an auto fight so that you can see everything that you need to know about this comp. Let's dive right into it. And welcome back to the channel. Let me know if you guys like that sort of little intro of the Ajax video. I think it's a pretty interesting touch. I'm working on getting an actual intro made here soon, but hopefully you guys enjoyed that so far. Let me know in the comment section down below if you did. So guys, this is the comp that I am currently using. As you can see, it's a little bit similar to a lot of other people, right? We have that typical Pyros, or I guess Infernal technically, led team. I don't unfortunately have Soul Cadens and or Twin Fiend. Hopefully, I believe we have a Twin Fiend banner coming up. Maybe I'll happen to get lucky and get a Twin Fiend from that if I decide to pull. Unsure if that's going to happen yet, but maybe. We do have that Lego Soulstone to use on him if we get him, so maybe we'll do it. We'll have to check it out. But ultimately, we have the kind of perfect triple DPS comp here in regards to Zillitu, Setram, and Hex, which I think is really, really good for us, right? We're getting a ton of damage from those champions. And then, of course, we're using 3 different Rage champions. Now, unfortunately, I don't have access to Leia, so we're doing things a little bit different by using Hollow, Elowen, and Laurel here. And then we have our Volca here to be able to reduce that cooldown. She's also a Nightmare unit, so she actually increases the damage of our Wrath. Realistically, I think this probably could be any other DPS type comp, and it may work out better. But unfortunately, at the same time, Volca is needed for this to be really efficient because of the cooldown on the revivals, in my personal opinion. But there may be a better melee DPS that you could bring instead of Wrath. Wrath does a pretty good job here, but it's not crazy. I could see some potential in maybe a Valeria or a Deimos, but not having that Lord bonus could prove difficult. Let me know in the comments if you guys think there's a better melee DPS that I, of course, have access to, which, you know, I don't have a crazy amount of champions, but I could see some other champions potentially fitting in there. We'll have to see what happens with that. But let's do a quick showcase of the gear, and also we're going to double check and make sure we have all the gear that we need, right? So this is my Wrath set. I think it's actually pretty good. It's not anything crazy, but because of Wrath's ultimate being a relatively quick cooldown, right? It's only a 300 cost, and it's automatic, so he actually procs this Soulbound Arcana pretty quickly. I personally really like this damage set for him. I would like to see a little more crit rate and obviously more crit damage, but just the way that my stuff has lined up, that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. For him personally, I'm just using a Frigid Flame because that's kind of all that I have, right? Then we go into Volca. So Volca is here for pretty much just the one reason, and that is to apply that A1, right? This A1 here for allied revival time, but she's also one of our invigoration bonuses. So this invigoration on Volca actually goes on to our Zillitu. Very, very helpful in this situation. We love that. Then we have our next champion here, which is our Laurel. Again, she is just there for the Rage Regen and the Invigoration buff. That is pretty much it. Then we have Elowen. So Elowen is here for a couple different things. One, she's an Invigoration buff, right? Two, she has that really great passive, which we are still working on. So that means that there's room to grow when it comes to progressing this. And in fact, let's do it on the video right here. Let's go. We got it. So we're actually going to maybe see a potential increase here because we did get that extra second off. So a little more rage regen for us. We'll have to see. But she's just built to be able to do a little bit of healing while she's on the field and provide that invigoration buff. And she's just using a euphoric orb, so we have a little bit of extra attack speed built in there as well. Then we have our Hollow. Hollow is our main healer, and realistically probably our main rage regen champ as well, just because she's on the field the entire time. And she does have this really, really nice passive, so whenever Light of Bliss is activated, You get a ton of rage, which is really, really good. So I'm very excited about that. And then also, I think it's her A. Is it her A3? No, it's her A1. Each healing restores 1% rage of rage cap. So she's actually built, with as low attack as I could get while still having some really good stuff. So she doesn't heal like a crazy amount. So you're able to get as much rage from that healing as possible. So she's pretty good in this comp, in my opinion. Then we have our boy Hex. Now Hex is in what I think a very good build personally. Again, he is in a Soulbound Arcana set with a Warlord set, and a little more crit rate would be really nice. A little more crit damage would be really nice. But ultimately, I think this is a pretty decent setup. We also have him in a Taunting Gaze. This is just because I don't have any of the good mythic artifacts, and I found that Taunting Gaze, with my own personal testing, is the best relic or artifacts, I'm sorry, that I have access to at this moment. But ultimately, he does a pretty good chunk of damage, so I would say that it's working. Then we have our Setram, and Setram is in a Ageless Wrath set, which I think is really good for him because of how his passive works and getting a ton of crit damage. And so I have him in this sort of really low crit rate set because of his passive, which stacks crit rate, which means he's actually at 100% crit rate. And he has a decent chunk of attack speed, right? So he's able to get to his overcharge really, really quickly, which means we get a ton of damage out of him. We also have him personally in the Oblivion Pendant, which is his exclusive artifact, which increases the ultimate duration by 5 seconds. This, I think, is actually really good. And the reason is because he is able to actually get damage on the boss during the shield down phase, where you get that extra damage bonus, which is really, really helpful for his damage and, our blood, of course, as well. It does also increase the duration of the self-repair, but realistically, this is fine because the way that it works out on my current team is he is able to almost immediately go back into his ultimate with the amount of rage that we have, as soon as, sometimes even before, he actually comes out of the self-repair, which I think is really powerful for him. He's almost always going to be in that ultimate, which is really good. Then we go into our girl, Zillatu. Zillatu is in probably the best gear set that I have on my account, the Infernal Roar, beautiful set I have on her right now. We've got that almost perfect crit rate. We've got plus 248% crit damage and a good chunk of attack, right around 150%, give or take a little bit. And I think she's doing really well. I also have a little bit of rage regen on her, which I think is really powerful, and a good extra almost 200 attack speed. Then we go into her artifact, and we have a COV, or as it's called now, a Wailing Skull. Unfortunately, the biggest problem I have with my account right now is that I just don't have the artifacts to make this really shine, which sucks. I also just realized I forgot to show off Hollow's artifact. She is also using a euphoric orb. So yeah, there you go. Then we have our Dolores. Now our Dolores is an invigoration set and basically just built for a little bit of rage regen, a ton of attack to be able to buff up. The rage regen for me personally, I have found is not super ridiculous because of how much rage we're generating. She's still going to have her ult up very, very regularly. So personally, I decided to go for invigoration with as much attack as possible just to get as much damage as we can out there. Then we have her artifact. She does not use a Tumultuous Horn. She uses a Keen Wisdom. We're going to make that swap now. I've been doing some Gear Raid 2 where I do use that Tumultuous Horn, but she then gets a ton of extra attack, which is really good as well. Then we have our guy Pyros. Now Pyros is built to do damage, but his main thing here is building attack speed and getting a ton of rage regen so that he can be ulting as much as possible. I do have him built in to actually deal a decent chunk of damage with this Night Terror set and having max crit rate, which I think is really, really good. I am kind of curious if I can get a weapon here. I probably can't. If I could, that'd be really cool, but let's see. I don't think we have anything with enough crit rate. 13.5%. That could be enough. No, that's not going to be enough. So we're not going to be able to do it while keeping a 100% crit rate, but that's okay. Ultimately, I think this is a pretty good set. We may be able to make some changes in a later time. But he is, of course, also a 4. A4 is not required. A3 is the really big damage increase you're going to get from him. And A5 is really nice outside of Guild Boss, but doesn't actually do anything for him in Guild Boss. So no need to worry about that. But even just a base Pyros is going to be really good. Then for him, I have him in a Max Nightmare Samsara just because he wants a ton of rage. You'll see he ults a lot in this fight. So now let's quickly go ahead and go over the placement and kind of how I do things, and then we'll run through a quick auto fight. So we're going to come in here right away, and it always starts on ×1 speed. I keep it on ×1 speed until I'm ready to go. So the first thing that I do here, guys, is I start to place my DPS. You're going to see I place my Hex. Right afterwards, I will place my Hollow. This guarantees that I get a attack bonus here. Of course, with the way that Invigoration works now, it's always going to happen anyways, but it's good to have that down. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop my Zilla2, followed by my Volca. This guarantees that I get a attack bonus on my Zilla2. I then quickly remove that Volca, and I will drop my Wrath. This is going to get him with that extra speed and get him ready to DPS the boss. Then from there, we drop our Cetrum in the back left corner. And from there, we also then drop our Pyros. Then we're going to drop our Dolores there, and that's going to give an attack buff to one of these people. It gives it to Pyros, which is fine, and then we're going to go ahead and drop our Laurel, and that is going to give our attack buff to Cetrum, which is perfect, exactly what we wanted. Okay, now obviously I would have activated my ultimates by now. I'm not doing a full run here, but this is where I would turn on 2x speed, and I would just start activating ultimates as quickly as I can. Once we get all of these ultimates up and activated, what we would do at that point is go ahead and remove our Laurel and immediately drop in our Eloin. This is going to make it so that I can get a ton of extra rage on the board, and we're pretty much just activating ultimates as they come at this point, because we're going to get a ton of rage from all of these things where we're basically in permanent ultimate, which is really, really good for us, of course. There we go, popping the Pyros, and this just gets us a ton of extra damage over time. Now, once we get to the point where we're right around 2 to 3 seconds on Laurel is when we're going to quickly remove our Eloin. So you'll see here we're at 4 seconds. I'm going to prepare, I'm going to remove, and we're going to immediately place the Laurel. Now, we're going to let Laurel stay on the board until we've activated the ultimates that are currently around. And then we are going to remove her. And at that point, we will immediately drop our Volca so that she is able... I accidentally activated my Pyros there a little too early, but that's okay. At this point is where we would go ahead and start activating all of our other DPS. And that's pretty much the process, right? We're going to just keep this up until we're ready to go. Once we get our Laurel back up, we will go ahead and place her after removing Volca. We'll see here in just a second. We get down to right around that 2 seconds. We remove, we place our Laurel. Right? And then in this case, I'm actually going to just remove her right away, drop our Eloin, pop everything, boom, boom, and just go from there. And then we'll just continue to repeat the process over and over and over again. And that's pretty much how we do this, right? So this has not been super optimal, don't get me wrong. I'm very aware there's a lot of changes we could do that are going to make this a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and do an auto run, so there's no sense in, super worrying about it. But that is pretty much how you do it. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. You can always watch this video back multiple times until you really get it down. But now we're going to go ahead and do an auto fight so that you can see exactly how I have it set up. And the reason I really like this comp is because of the fact that it's very, very consistent. As long as you have the gear on the champions that you used when you originally did this, you're going to see that most of these timings will continue to line up because of the way that the rage is working. You'll see a lot of the things are happening right away, which is really, really powerful. Another small little tip is to try to make sure you keep your Laurel on the field until all of your other DPS activate their ultimates. The reason this is because they'll get a slight DPS increase, which is a little bit helpful when you're trying to deal damage. Other than that, though, this is pretty much it. It works really well in both Nightmare 3 and Nightmare 4. And of course, it is gear dependent to a degree on how much blood you're actually going to be able to get. But I have yet to have a fight where I don't beat that third shield running this comp. I do have pretty decent gear, including the access to things like Soulbound Arcana and Infernal Roar. But other than that, my gear is relatively basic in my opinion. I'm looking for basic DPS stats, basic support stats, and that's pretty much it. And obviously, I'm able to hit that 20k marker really, really easy because of the fact that I'm using this comp, but I have really bad artifacts, right? And not only that, I'm actually breaking over into the 30k mark, which is, in my opinion, really good for the stage of the game that I'm at. I'm going to be farming a ton of AMR so that I can start building on my artifacts, because there's a lot of artifacts that I need for both Guild Boss and other content. But ultimately, you'll see here we're going to hit right around 30k, and all I need to do is hit 25k, and I'm able to do a two key for the top chest in Nightmare 4, which is very powerful. I do highly recommend doing the diamond refreshes for 200 diamonds for an extra entry, because what that's going to do is allow you to be able to get a potentially higher chance at picking up one of those Lego Soul Stones. Let's take a real quick look at the damage report here, and you'll be able to see what kind of damage we're doing. Personally, I think this damage is actually not terrible. There is a lot of room to grow, like I said, with the extra skill ups on Eloin, as well as getting a better and increased gear for everyone and artifacts. But our Zilla 2 doing decent damage right around 76 million. She is probably going to be your highest DPS if you're running a very similar comp. But, you know, if you're running someone like a Silas, for example, that may be a little bit different, right? Because Silas is really, really powerful as well, especially if you have a Piercer Lord. But other than that, Zilla 2 is probably going to be your highest DPS, followed pretty closely by your Hex. Hex is doing a respectable almost 60 million. It kind of jumps between 58 and 61 million. Pretty good there. Again, we could definitely increase his gear to be quite a bit better, but it's not too bad for now. We have Setrum here at 38.5. Now, something to keep in mind here, if you didn't already know, is that the damage to the shield does not actually calculate in this stat page. So Setrum is actually doing a lot more damage than it is showing here. I also have my Setrum at A1, which means both my Zilla 2 and my Hex are getting a crazy extra damage bonus when they are fighting the shield because of his A1. While he's in his ultimate, he shares that 30% damage to shields, which is really helpful as well. Then we have a respectable 25 million from Wrath. Again, he is not really the best option here. There could be some other options here as well. And then we have, again, a respectable 18.7 on our Pyros. He's not really there for damage. He's mainly there to buff the other triple DPS, but he does do a respectable amount of damage. And then, of course, we just kind of have no one here. Again, we place the Volca simply because you get a little bit of extra damage, but as you can see, it's very minor. This could be better if you have a DPS set of Invigoration, or if you just put her in DPS gear, right, instead of getting that Invigoration buff. But ultimately, guys, I think this is probably going to wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up on the video. And also, don't forget to comment down below with what is your current Blood and Nightmare difficulty. I'm curious to see where my viewers are. And are you able to do the Rage Regen comp? I know a lot of my viewers actually do have some of those really good Rage Regen champs because of all the recent 10x's, with Hollow happening twice, Eloin just happening recently. Could be very interesting to see how many of you guys have this setup ready to go. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be notified when my content goes live. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.